Hello.
Good morning.
Good morning. As we're waiting for Jesse, and I know that Brian and Samantha couldn't make it, so welcome to the meeting. Hope you've had a good week. I know people have been active in the Slack and then active in. We had a meeting Thursday night, and that was sort of an organizational meeting for some of the cognitive futures reading group stuff. So we're planning on starting a reading group on some of the cognitive futures work, specifically in the area of embodied cognition. And, we're going to try to conceive pretty broadly. So it could be like radical embodied cognition, it could be agents, it could be, anything that kind of relates to it. So we're gonna start that. I don't know. I know Amanda was there. What are your thoughts about that, Amanda?
I'm really looking forward to it. I think that the readings we picked for the first week will be a really good jumping off point. The paper about Varela and then the intro to On Becoming Aware. I think that will allow for a lot of cool branching.
Yeah. Hello, Jesse.
Morning, everyone.
All right. And Himanshu, hello.
Hello.
So I offer people the floor to give updates on what they've been doing. So who would like to go first? I know we haven't met in 2 weeks, but it's...
I'll go last, so
Okay,
anyone
yeah.
else who wants to go is welcome to do so.
Okay.
I can go ahead.
Okay.
I'm looking forward to the Cognition Futures reading group. I have been continuing to work through Grossberg's book and the accompanying YouTube videos from Johann John. I've been continuing to work through the Dynamical Systems YouTube videos, also from Johann John. I fell down in a phenomenology rabbit hole. It's relevant to Varela's stuff, but doing a philosophy master's program, before I could even form my own opinions on phenomenology, I was kind of told that it wasn't real philosophy, or at least it was something very different than the philosophy that really matters. But so I don't know that much about it, but I'm finding it very interesting. I found some cool talks on the phenomenology of psychosis and of psychopathologies. That was very interesting, and definitely relevant to Varela's work for sure. So I'm hoping that could come up in the reading group eventually.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I've been good.
Good. Well, that's good.
Could I ask you what a psychopathology is?
A mental disorder.
Okay.
It's just an umbrella term.
Okay. I'm curious about that. More to say about that later, but that all sounds pretty cool. I'm really curious. I'm very happy to have you here because I think of all of the... For those who don't know about sort of cognitive science as a broader field in quotes. This is all kind of in quotes and kind of like, I don't know. It's sort of I keep changing how I want to refer to it because it's sort of this. There was the project and the idea, and there's the reality, and there's this lot of disparity in between. But it basically was sort of an attempt to combine like 6 different subfields of like anthropology and artificial intelligence, and philosophy and psychology and other stuff that I'm thinking about this because I just saw this is such a winding road, but I saw a conversation. I think I posted it in the To Discuss section in Slack, but I saw a conversation that involved Tony Shimero, who we talk about here, and also Fred Cummins, who's another cool person that I've versed before, who's a older player in the cognitive science game, and he's based in Ireland, I believe. UCI? Is it UCD? Usually College of Dublin, I think, in Ireland. And there was a discussion, and happened to see him advertising his master's program, and the way that he spoke about his master's program was very specific, in that it's a master's program to train people to do research in the cognitive sciences, and it's not an artificial intelligence program, and it's not a linguistics program. Honestly, it was kind of a bad video because unless you know, if you have no idea, and I guess maybe it wasn't a bad video because it was kind of exclusive. It was more. It almost felt a bit like he was more saying, only come here if you really want to do this specific thing, and we're not going to do this, we're not going to do that. And he was stressing, this is not a vocational degree, this is not a clinical degree. And he was saying this is specifically for further research in the cognitive sciences. And what he meant was like this is for like basically kind of addressing the bigger unifying issues of the cognitive science project. Maybe is what I feel most comfortable talking about it as. And in doing so, he delineated all this stuff. And well, he did. It was a very short video, but it was like, yeah. And so how people frame and talk about cognitive science, and even when he was saying it, he mentioned like the big 6. I think there were 6 different major subfields. But then he very carefully said, and maybe there's a few other fields that we cross as well. And it was just a very interesting way that he was like, hey, we're not going to be doing, this isn't a specific, this isn't a master's, this isn't like a master's in computer science, which is very much like a vocational degree or clinical psychology degree or whatever. But he said it was a very specific thing, and the way he went about it was just quite particular. So this is a very long way to say, out of all of the at least traditional branches of of what cognitive science tried to do, I think I'm the most rich one that I'm least familiar with, I think, is philosophy. So I'm super glad that you're here and I can just ask you questions from the standpoint of like, what's it like to have that background? Because for those who don't know, like when you hear Amanda say heavy discouragement to look into phenomenology, like that's not like an arbitrary comment. That comes from very specific viewpoints that people hold in particular fields. And there's absolutely people in computer science who are like, cognitive science is BS. Like, what do you get out, don't even try to work with me if you're doing that. And so there's a heavy amount of like, I would say partisanship, but also just like academic clout and weight. And if you really get further in academia, you see like petty politics between the departments and different amounts of ego and tradition and all sorts of things at play that are quite messy, but also like are really important to talk about if you want to be going into those fields, and not just like I think those things should be a lot more centered than they are, as opposed to kind of, they often be like, oh yeah, they're kind of side comments or like really inside baseball, which is kind of an outdated term, like inside baseball meaning like really in-depth discussion. So anyway, this is a large tangent, but I think it's kind of for people who are interested in understanding like the frontier maps concept or learning about these things, I think it's kind of good to just have that brought up. So I kind of said a lot there. I don't know if Amanda or Bradley wants to kind of follow up on any of that, but that kind of just hit me because I was watching that Fred Cummins video the other day, and that just came out. So yeah.
Well, that's good. Yeah. I can say something later, but thank you for that. That's very insightful. I think it's definitely the frontier maps. That's kind of where it comes from. Is this need to integrate things to see where the roots of a field are. So where the assumptions come from, where people are sort of thinking, and then ultimately where it goes. Because if you have people coming from certain fields, it's going to go in certain directions, right?
Yeah, I think it's super important and really difficult to explain. Maybe this is something I'll specifically add in my frontier. I'm still working on the frontier map paper, more about it later. I think it's super difficult and really important to explain, especially on the frontiers of whether it's the cognitive science stuff or even like neuroscience and computer science and all these things. Like the origin of fields maybe is somewhat discernible of like where and how, but so much of the endpoints or the aim of fields, like if you ask Fred Cummins and Tony Shamero, I'm sure they'd agree on a lot, but not everything. The endpoint and the trajectory of where fields are going is super not. It's so different from like how you're trained to think at an earlier age of here, Aristotle said this, and Einstein figured out this. It's like there's so much like a different perspective to be had. So, and all about that, I can wax about this for a long time, but yeah, more about all this later. So yeah.
Okay.
Amanda, did you want to say anything about that really quickly, or should we move on to other people's updates?
We can move on.
Okay, great. Sorry, everybody. I've kind of had a thing there. Yeah, I don't know if Amaris wants to say anything, or Himanshu, if you want to. I think this is your first time here, so you're welcome to introduce yourself if you'd like to do that too.
Yeah, this is my first time. Yeah, thanks, Joseph. I'll introduce myself. I'm Himanshu from India, and I got to know about orthogonal research lab through GSoC, the INCF organization, and I'm for the main thing was I'm doing a project in the. Yeah, I didn't prepare for this. So
okay.
Yeah, sorry. I'm trying for a GSoC project on a collective cognition model for AI ethics, and right now I'm preparing a proposal for it, and yeah, I'm getting to learn new things every day, and it's nice.
Good.
Great.
Yeah.
That's
sorry, I fumbled a lot.
No, it's okay. That's exactly how I found a lab 3 years ago. So hopefully it works out for you, and really glad to have you here. And I'm sure Bradley would say more about this, but you're welcome to be a part of the lab, and if you want to pursue the project, and hopefully things find them interesting, and excuse me. It's great that you're here today too.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and I'll talk a little bit more about the project and some of the things that we've been discussing a little bit later on. So we'll be the deadline for that project is Tuesday. So people are watching and they want to submit if they want to submit a proposal, go ahead and submit it by Tuesday. You could send it to me to look over, but it's going to be pretty tight. So it's going to be I might not be able to give you as much feedback as otherwise would be able to, but yeah, and if you don't get selected for it, then we still have opportunities in the lab to work on things. And I think that topic for this project is going to be particularly fruitful. We've had a number of people, kind of engaged with the material, with what, I presented at New York Celebration of Women in Computing last week. And so there's been some interest in, sort of driving this project forward. Maybe parts of it, if people don't get the actual spot in GSoC. So I'll talk about that later in the meeting, though. So it was nice to see Amaris present at New York Celebration of Women in Computing in conjunction with Jesse. They did this section on the last section in the talk. And so does Amaris have a update for us, or?
Well, I haven't really been as productive as I'd like to be,
Okay.
I thought I would be. So it's just been that kind of week. But I've been mainly listening to some podcasts, still with about Timnit, or her experiences, or just ethics in general. A lot of them so far have been focusing on kind of how we are as a society right now, and then how that kind of has been interconnecting to technology. So it was interesting. I'm probably gonna listen to a few more of those, and then I plan on looking through the Slack a little more to see the articles that other people posted, see what interests me specifically, and I'm hoping to help Jesse with the frontier map if I have time. But, yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you for the update, and I'm glad that you're getting, hitting the ground running, as they say. I would suggest keep going, and see what you find really interesting. And I think you weren't here for the meetings when I sort of introduced the concept of what we were going to be doing in an internship. But the one thing you can maintain is momentum. If you have a week where you don't get very much done, at least you want to say you did something, and just keep thinking about it. Don't worry about how many things you've read or how much output you've written down. It's just some weeks are going to be faster than others, some weeks are going to be more productive than others, but you just have to maintain that momentum going on, and then you keep just thinking about it, and in the background, if you can't make as much progress as you'd like, and eventually it'll it's cumulative. Eventually you're going to get to a place where you feel really comfortable with what you want to do, and finding a research topic is not instantaneous either. It sounds like you've got a good area where you want to focus, but just finding a small research topic within that is kind of what you're aiming for. And it sounds like you're getting there. You're exploring different things, so definitely keep going in that direction. And if you have questions, Jesse or I will help you with it.
I'll definitely do that. Thank you.
Welcome. Do you want anything, Jesse?
No. Well, I mean, yes.
Okay.
I think there's a lot of good stuff that's happened so far. The talk at the conference was very good, and the only thing I might ask is, not ask, but suggest is I'm very interested in all of this stuff, and I think if there's a question that could be answered, maybe is there anything that ties into I think also just longer term projects or interests that are developing, or things that you might want to pursue in the future, either not necessarily as part of your career, but potentially, or other stuff like that. You don't have to know this at all now. It's more it's more just a personal inner thought of I wonder what Amaris is thinking about in terms of how what she's studying will affect things she wants to do in the future. And that's not at all something you have to write a report about. There's no right or wrong answer about that. But it's something that I'm curious about, and more something we can talk about later on or as things develop too. In a much more near term, definitely, like, I'm personally, like, very okay. Like, if you want to really continue to dive into Tim Jabru's story, like, I think there's a lot to be said and written and understood about that, because there's so much that goes into everything. I feel like her story is a really great public, fairly visible example of a lot of things that are happening in the space of like modern day machine learning, tech ethics, society, and there's, that's just an important context. So that's definitely, like, just there's endless possibilities in that arena. But as far as Frontier Map goes, I'll be saying a little bit more about that later, and I'm returning to that, and I think that's something I really want to hammer out, because we kind of got past. I guess this will weave into my update right now, which is basically the last 2 weeks for me have been super fun and super busy, and I'm tired and fatigued. I've traveled a lot. I traveled over 7 hours 2 days ago, and I still feel tired. I'm still like, I still feel like I've been sitting in a car so much. And then last weekend for the conference in New York Celebration on Women Computing, that was a lot of traveling too, and just sitting. And I've been, it's been the first time in 3 years I've been around people. I've been around people without masks on. I mean, in the traveling and at the conference, there was mask requirement, but like in Boston and Connecticut and New York, different areas of it were pretty open. And it's just like, I feel comfortable, actually, but it's just very different. It's like, wow, like this is almost like it's very much a pre-pandemic experience where it's like people are out and functioning at in-person conferences, and I'm starting to see my friends and colleagues posting stuff on like their Instagram pages about, I had an in-person conference. We had, and it's like, wow, it's like, so all that stuff is just wild and radical and different and fun and exciting, but also I feel like I've gotten a lot of perspective the last couple of weeks, because it's just a part of my life hasn't been. I haven't done that, and a lot of people I know haven't done anything close to that. So that's kind of the broad view. Specifically, we've done the Cognition Futures Reading Group has resurrected, and I'm very happy for that. Amanda's a part of that. Bradley was there. This is totally open for anyone who's interested. It's not mandatory, but if you're interested in a lot of the cognitive science stuff that we talked about, that I had my opening speech or sermon about a few minutes ago, and you want to hear more about that, we're reading some in-depth stuff right now. We're going to be looking at a lot of Varela and embodiment-related work again, sometimes for the new time, for a new take on it totally. But that's happening. Brian, I believe, will be joining us also. And it'll be I'm actually going to mention some other folks. Oh, one thing I wanted to mention. Amanda, I believe I connected you and Johan directly via email. They are still doing stuff, but right now it's currently really neuroscience heavy. So you're welcome to go. I didn't get to go to last week's meeting. They're on Wednesday nights, which is partly why we're not doing Wednesday nights. But if you or anyone else is really interested in the neuroscience component, or we hear Johan John mentioned and you're curious about his work, let me know, because I could get you into their live discussions Wednesday nights. I don't know if you're interested in that right now, Amanda. I think, but you do have access to them if you want to go to them. Is that true? Or
I have his email address. I've been going through the recorded videos on YouTube though, and that's good enough for me for now. Yeah, the stuff we're doing right now is much more neuroscience. Yeah,
they're returning kind of back to heavier focus on that. They kind of oscillate from like heavy philosophy back and forth, and it's really, sometimes I'm not as deep into that aspect of things too, but just wanted to check on that. Yeah. Let's see. We'll probably do a recap of the New York Celebration of Computing Conference soon. I know we have some other updates and deadlines. I may be able to share some pictures from the event if I can get them, if just on my phone and my computer will cooperate. So more about that later. I'm wearing the shirt. I just put the shirt on. I got an extra large, or maybe a 2XL, which is a bit big for me, but there weren't that many left when I got there. And I'll take, it's not, I'll wear it either way. That's the kind of guy that I am. So, yeah, let's see. I have frontier map work is happening, cognition features is moving forward. The only other thing, and this is kind of adjacent or tangential to a lot of the things that we mentioned. One of the, it specifically actually came out of, we were just talking about it in terms of the Cognition Futures Reading Group and looking at methodologies in cognitive science, basically. That's a very interesting topic for me in terms of, I don't want to steer that entirely into virtual reality discussion, but virtual reality, augmented reality, and that topic of methodology in cognitive science are going to be the direction I'm heading in later this year in a lot of ways. Also, I found I'm almost mad because I didn't see it before and would have applied to it, but I found a group at the MIT's Media Lab that is doing some adjacent stuff. There's a whole bunch of things there, and for those that don't know, the Media Lab changes their projects out pretty regularly. Like it's a bunch of like kind of blended, perhaps esoteric, innovative. They have projects that get funded for like a limited couple of years, and they recruit people to work on the projects inside the lab. And applications are kind of different, and it's very. They have had some controversial affiliations, and they're a very interesting place and a strange place. But there's some cool stuff going on there that I want to reach out to regarding what I just mentioned. So that's in the works too. I don't have any major immediate conferences, so I'd be happy if we could go over like our submissions and deadlines. I'm sure we will later today, but I just like if I'm kind of curious about what the next immediate target in that sense is. But I think that's it. That's it for me. I know I said a whole bunch already, but I don't know. I would offer you if you have any updates, Bradley, or like kind of what you see the agenda for the rest of today to be. Is my question.
Well, I have a couple things. I have a talk on. Well, I want to go over the GSoC stuff, and then I want to go over maybe the submissions. I have that open. And, when I get to a paper, I don't think last time we got to a paper at all, so we'll get to a paper, maybe two papers. Yeah, we did.
We had a very full meeting last 2 weeks ago. It was a really great meeting.
Yeah. And then maybe talk a little bit about what's in the Slack channels. We haven't done that in a long time, but meetings at one time got a little heavy on that, so, but we'll probably go over that. Why don't I start then with, I guess I'll do the GSoC thing first. So, let's see. All right, so if you're interested in the GSoC project for this year, you go to our Ethics Society and Tech channel in the Slack. And if you notice in this channel, we have 5 pinned things. So you have this little thing that says 5 pinned, and you click on that and you'll see that there are things that are pinned to the channel. It means that we want to bring people's attention to them. So this talks about New York.
Probably unpin that one now, actually.
Probably what? Oh, get rid of this one?
We can probably. Yeah,
so this one
was
is
for the
old.
conference specifically.
Okay. So that remove pinned item. So that was for New York Celebration of Women in Computing. So I actually posted some things on GSoC here. So I think this one is actually relevant. So if I go up here, I give a sort of a description of what we're doing. So the description of the project is twofold. We have the sort of the modeling the open source community part, and figuring out how to create a sustainable open source community. So, this is something that you could approach using like reinforcement learning, or you could approach it using a boxes and arrows model, or, there are other techniques that people could use. Basically, you're trying to figure out, you're trying to build feedback loops. You're trying to build in, reward mechanisms for different activities and different types of things in the community. So, this is pretty broad, and I do this on purpose because I want to see what people will come up with. Just think about and maybe it will require some reading on open source communities and what they do. But it's, basically people contributing to a software platform or contributing to a community of people online. It's distributed. It's, there are collaborations that get built in real time. So it's not like a top-down system where you have a hierarchy of people. This person tells this person what to do. It's very open in that way. So we have to have some sort of regulatory mechanism to help facilitate things, either, behaviorally reinforcing virtuous behaviors or improving the sustainability of things. So when, you build something and you have to sustain it, you have to update it, you have to make sure that, people are using it and using it in ways that are, helpful to them. So there are a lot of different factors here. Now, I wouldn't start with modeling everything. I'd start with a very simple set of relationships, maybe a feedback loop, maybe some other things going into it, and then implement it. The idea over this project would be to implement it in some computational manner. So that's the first part. Now, the second part is this agent-based modeling approach, and so this is something that we use NetLogo for in the lab. It's really the only platform that really it's open enough so that you can have a library of simulations that you can use. You can see the code, but also something that you can have output data for and generalize the results. So there are a number of models in NetLogo. They're like models of cooperation and game theoretic models and other things. And the idea would be to try to find a model that, there's no model for open source communities, what I'm saying. So you'd have to pick some model that would, mirror some of the attributes of the open source community that you're interested in the first part. So you'd model that using sort of a model of your choice so that you could generate, you could basically simulate the community. Then the NetLogo, the agent-based model would be for setting up a model where you have agents that interact with one another. And this gives you output data. It could be payoffs, it could be other things, and you could use that to train your first model. And so the alternative to the second part, and I figured this out, or we discussed this, I think I was talking to someone this week about it, is to use a small data set. And there are actually data sets available from Wikipedia. There are data sets available from GitHub repositories of various open source communities. So the data exists for actually modeling some of this as well. So this agent-based model could be supplanted with data sets, although the data sets are pretty imperfect. So this is why I suggest using the agent-based model. And, it's basically those two parts of it. You have some sort of regulatory representation. I wouldn't even really call it a model, although it could be something like a reinforcement learning model. And then you have this agent-based model that generates sort of the interactions. Or you could use a data set that shows the interactions as they exist in some real open source community. Now, it's a pretty tough thing. I don't expect people to get it exactly right in the proposal, so don't worry about that. We would be working on this, trying to implement parts of this, and we need to, at some point we would need to have a deliverable, but we'd figure that out as, maybe like the first part could be, if you're using a reinforcement learning model, it's pretty easy, right? You just have that model and you submit that to the program. But if you have a boxes and arrows model, you may need to find a way to have a file that saves like systems models or something. But we'll figure that out. And then the net logo model, you would have the code and run it, and it's all open source, so you can, that's the code you're using. You might modify the code in your agent-based model. And then in the talk I gave to the New York Celebration of Women in Computing, I mentioned that if you're interested in something like cultural evolution, you might, because there isn't, I don't know if there's I think there are models of cultural evolution, but they're not really what we want. You might be interested in generating your own net logo program. That's a little difficult because you have to like kind of learn how net logo handles things, but it's possible if you're really, if you're a really creative programmer, you might be able to do it. So that's the recap of the project. Now this is the link to NeuroStars. Let me see if I can open that up. All right, so this is the NeuroStars project here. And we have the description here. So this is the description. I mentioned taking a cybernetic approach. So that first part is the cybernetic approach. We're interested in recurrent relationships, feedback loops, causal loops, reciprocal causality. And so and then I mentioned this other part here talking about Mick Ashby's ethical regulator. So the ethical regulator is this model of regulating ethical behavior. And it's, something where they have a bunch of variables that act as input to this ethical regulator. And it's, it's something that is, I don't know, this is the Wikipedia link. I don't know if it's something you want to implement. This is the ethical regulator. So you have purpose, ethics, intelligence, predictability, variety, and truth. Those are all very broad variables. So I don't know, if you want to necessarily grab onto those, you might grab onto one and it might be an entire project. So that's a problem, that you would have to kind of get around by, say, defining these variables. So purpose would be what? Ethics would be what? Intelligence would be what? We have, measurements of them, but you'd have to define them pretty tightly. And then that leads to action, this regulated system, and then awareness. And the only real thing here that I want to draw attention to is this feedback loop between the regulated system and the ethical regulator. So we talked a couple weeks ago about the ever good regulator, or what they call a good regulator. And the good regulator has a controller and a controlled component. The controlled component is this, the controller is this. The controller has to have enough states to control this part here. So, if this part has 50 states, this part better have something close to 50 states. It can't have 3 states, and it can't have 500 states, because it's, although it may be able to predict better with a lot of states, usually a one-to-one mapping is what we want. So that's the idea of the ethical regulator. And that, if that's something that you're interested in, this is just something where they define the regulator's effectiveness is like a multiplicative relationship of all these things. So not only are you saying that these variables all play a role, but they're all sort of multiplicative. I don't really expect you to follow that convention, because that's not, I don't know if that really, you might want to read this. There's a paper here in systems, and then this is the original Conant and Ashby paper. You might just use this model as inspiration, let's say. So that's what we have for that. And then this project, of course, is 12 weeks of coding. You can extend the project up to 22 weeks. So, they're being flexible this year. Usually it's 12 weeks. This project would be 40 hours a week because it has the 2 parts. It can be extended up to 22 weeks. And you would just adjust the hours. So, if you wanted to extend it out, you'd work fewer hours per week, and that would be it. And then, again, we need to submit a runnable executable file at the end of the program if you're selected. If we decide to work on this outside of, the official program, we don't necessarily need to submit a runnable executable. We can just work on some of these parts on their own and just kind of see where we get. And that may be, for some of these things, it may be better because, you don't have that time pressure to get everything implemented. So, and then I think there's a lot of promise here in this project. I think this project has a lot of promise. I've talked about some of these components with people. And, again, if you want to learn more about this, our Ethics Society and Technology group is, we're always talking about things like this. It really comes from this idea of open source and sort of the need to have a better system for understanding what goes on in open source communities. And one of the issues that has arisen out of many issues has been this issue of open source projects being used by large concerns like governments and corporations, and then having things happen like security breaches where the software has a security flaw and the original contributors have moved on, or they don't have the resources to patch the software effectively. So when Log4j happened, which was something Aaron's interested in, it happened I think late last year, early this year. The government actually called together a bunch of open source stakeholders and tried to figure out a way forward that would, help these entities respond to things like this. So, security is the most common thing that's a problem. Sometimes it's also just maintaining the software. So sometimes, open source software, people put a lot into it, and then, you get new versions of your devices, and then it stops working. And so that's a problem too. I think we had something in the Ethics Society and Tech channel a while back about bionic eyes, and how the bionic eyes, for this one clinical trial, they stopped working because the firmware, I guess, had become out of date. And so that's not great when your software becomes out of date. But there, it's not. It's something that's actually quite common in more prosaic settings, like for different tools that you're using, and the reason that is because it's hard to, have a community where you have a robust set of maintainers, a robust set of contributors who can meet the technical challenges and so forth. So this is why we're interested in this kind of model. Now, if you're Google or if you're Linux, you have money to invest in open source development. You can just pay people and bring them in. But if you have a smaller project, it's actually less likely that you can do that just by, resources alone. You have to figure out, and again, it's teamwork. It's building these, small distributed teams that do things. So, Linux's kernel was built by a bunch of people who were working on the weekend. They were working just on their own. They weren't paid they didn't have a formal structure. They didn't get paid. They just built the thing. And of course, again, that's something that we use to this day, but it's something that had to be built upon and maintained. But just to let you know, there is a unique culture to open source software. And so that's what we're trying to get at with this project. So, check out these pinned items in the channel. And, we'll talk more about some of these issues with, agent-based models and open source data sets on open source and other things as we go along. For the proposal, you don't need to know everything. You don't need to have you need to have a good schedule of how you want to do things. But it's really just implementing different tools, and and then you'll say I'm going to consult with our mentors, and we're going to discuss how to go forward. That's something that will resolve as the project goes on. So the details are, you'll implement you should know kind of what you want to do, but you don't have to have all the details nailed down. All right. So Jesse posted in the chat Fred Cummins on the MS and CogSci at his university. So this is a YouTube video for that.
Yeah, that's what I mentioned earlier. About the GSoC stuff, I would say a couple things. One, really quickly, the sort of bionic eye enhancements that Bradley mentioned, in the perfect version that did not, the ideal perfect version, in the maybe would it be more? Is it Aristotle or Plato? Like the idea, the perfect idea of the presentation that I gave at New York Celebration of Living Computings. I was going to use that specifically, that example, because that was actually the front page of IEEE Spectrum, which is like, IEEE is like the major, electrical and electric something else engineers group. But it's like a big worldwide international group about, that was actually front page of their Spectrum magazine, maybe 2 months ago or something like that. And in the ideal version of the platonic ideal, thank you, Amanda, I would have had, maybe at the start, but like before I got into some of Aaron's stuff about LogJ4, and that whole area, I was gonna pull up, I was gonna say, yeah, and look at this on the front page of EAI Spectrum, this is a big deal. But basically, suffice to say, yes. How do we manage that? That's a major issue, and you can look into that if you want to. I don't know. I have one sort of, I don't know, philosophical point and one very concrete point about the Google Summer Code project. Quickly, the philosophical point is like, and this even came up a bit at the discussion at the conference, was like, technology is not only outpacing legislation, in a sense, and directly tied to what Bradley just said, technology is kind of outpacing technology too. And what I mean by that specifically is the liquidity of people focusing on projects and the money structure that supports, in the case of the bionic eyes, is one thing, or even open source, which is maybe even harder in one sense, depending on what level of configurations it is. Like, that's a tough thing to do. Like how do you keep people focused on maintaining a specific thing when they have other either things in their life going on or other ways to make money or things to do? Like, it's like there's a lot of uncertainty about how do we even do that. No less how do we regulate that stuff from an ethical or whatever, political, legal perspective. How do we just get enough people looking at it? How do we automate that? How do we deal with what are ways of having means to address those concerns? And that's kind of what the project's getting at a little bit. And then something I maybe should just write in the Google Summer Code NeuroStars thing, just to kind of put it out there. Although it's kind of, people probably have it by now, but I would just say if you're coming to us to join our lab or learning about the project and you want more information about it, I would say really, 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 really don't feel too overwhelmed, because we have this talk with the interns now and then, but it's like we're looking at interdisciplinary research, and there's no way you're going to have like solid footing in all the things that we're talking about. That's okay. Like, we are here. I'm a mentor in the project. Bradley's here, and other people in our lab are here to kind of like, we can facilitate some of the massive interdisciplinary questions and morass and stuff. We could point you in directions. And if you want to focus on building out for the strict Google Summer Code, like, yeah, you can build out some software, you can build out some actual code that runs and does stuff. But like, it's very expected that you do not know a lot of the references that we're making or things about there. So if you're don't let that be a turnoff, I guess. But if you're interested in interdisciplinary aspects of stuff and the complicated stuff we're talking about, we can definitely support you as you do that. And don't I just wouldn't want that to be, oh, I don't know enough about, I don't know, tech ethics outright, so I can't do this. No, like it's like in reality, there's not really a lot of people don't know much about it, and we're trying to create some solutions and tools to make that better. So don't just consider that don't let that be too much of a barrier to entry. And it hasn't been. There's been a lot of people reached out to us, but just wanted to reaffirm that we're here to help you with that. Do you have any follow-ups on that, Bradley?
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of a new area we could call open source ethics.
Yeah.
So this isn't necessarily, it's related to tech ethics as we talk about it generally in terms of like, thinking about bias in algorithms and, spying on, taking people's data or, there's data privacy, there's like algorithmic bias. And then, we're kind of forging a new path here, but it's related to those things. It's this open source ethics. How do you build a sustainable community where you have virtuous behaviors? How do you have an inclusive build software that maybe is inclusive? You have, with an emphasis on not just sustainability, but also on accessibility and even usability, which we don't talk about in this project, but it's something that we could, if people are interested in that area, that's something that, if you're thinking about this even more broadly than anything I've mentioned in the Google Summer of Code project, we have these issues. Because basically, open source software, you're building it from sort of, you're bootstrapping it into existence. Sometimes you're contributing to an existing platform, but sometimes you're just building something from scratch. And in doing that, you have to have, there's a lot of management involved in saying, what do we want in the software? What can people contribute? What's, feasible? How do we keep people from doing malicious things with our software? How do we, build the software for people so that they can use it? We have to think about our different user groups. And again, this is like algorithmic bias. We don't want to build the software for like the mean individual. We want to make sure that people can use it in different types of people in different settings. We want to also have, be responsible with data use and with other things. So this is all very much tied into tech ethics. I just wanted to make that clear because I know it doesn't seem like it's rooted in anything maybe, but that's kind of where it's rooted. So, and again, like if you're applying to the Google Summer of Code project, what I'd like to see in the proposal is a schedule week by week of what you're going to do. So how are you going to implement these different things? You'll have the first part and then the second part. And if you have, I want to also see if you have some barrier or obstacle that happens, say, in implementing the first part of it. How will you overcome that? Will you do something else for a while? Will you try other, different approaches, alternate approaches? How do you want to do that? So, and, I don't, if we work on this separately, I don't necessarily need to see that in writing, but I want people to think about that aspect of it. And maybe even in research too, is that if you have, you're doing this thing and you're sort of have a plan, if things come up and, you can't achieve your original plan, how are you going to get around those barriers? How are you going to modify your project? Do you have, rival hypotheses or rival approaches that you're going to use? And, sometimes that sort of strategy is good, if you want it in research as well as in software development, because you can, you don't get stuck on a problem and you spend like a year or something trying to get things. And of course, in Google Summer Code, you can't do that. But even in research, you really can't because your momentum dies and then the project is likely to die. So if you're doing your GSoC proposal, I want to see that in writing in the proposal. But I want to have that as a broader lesson for people. But in any case. So I did want to talk about one more thing with respect to this project. The Platonic ideal. That's what it is, Jesse. So the other thing I want to talk about is that we have data, and you can get data. And I've put this in. This is from a talk that I gave on networks and community in open source communities. And this part about long tails. So one of the things we see in community data or any kind of data where we're looking at maybe how people use things is this idea of the long tail. And this has been popular for a long time. It's actually a pretty rigorous methodology, but there's a book by Chris Anderson, The Long Tail, which talks about this. You may have also heard about people talking about phase transitions and about long tails and fat tails. So a long tail is this phenomena in statistics where you have what they call an exponential distribution. So a normal distribution is where you have what they call bell curve or Gaussian distribution. So it looks like this. And you can see that this is it looks like a bell. You have this area of support, which is the sort of the mean section, the central tendency of the distribution. And this is where most of your observations are going to lie. So the idea is that you have these observations and they have a certain value. Like you might have reaction times, or you might have like time of flight. And you measure that for a bunch of different replications of your data. And you get like a mean, and you get a standard deviation. So the mean is like x bar. That's the notation. Standard deviation is this symbol here. You have this as your distribution. This is the variance. So it's centered upon 0. It's negative something, and it's positive something. Okay. And then this is your frequency here. I guess they use this notation for that. So this is a normal distribution. The idea being is that you have a lot of things in the central tendency. You have a lot of things at the mean or around the mean. Maybe like one standard deviation away from the mean on either side. And that's where most of everything happens. Your tails are beyond these regions here. And the tails are considered outliers. So a lot of times when people talk about normal distributions, they talk about outliers, and it's sort of a negative thing. Outliers, we can get rid of the outliers. It's not always a great idea to get rid of the outliers, but people treat the outliers as superfluous. So the thing you're interested in is this central tendency, and then minimizing your standard deviation. So your standard deviation should be, somewhat limited. And you want to have a lot of observations. So you want to have a large N, which is like N of, actually this should I think be P or something like that, because this is, N is actually what we're going to use for our sample size, right? N is a large sample size, and you're going to be looking at the variance. Actually, this is Z, I'm sorry. This will become clear why I'm doing all this notation, being picky with the notation in a minute. Let's see if I can get this back here. Okay. All right, there we go. So this is, if you've ever seen a z-score, this is what a z-score is. It's a z-score is like this. You take the data in this normal distribution, you transform it into a z-score, and then you can say like something is positive or negative z, and then if it's within maybe like 2.5 z of either side, that's a roughly corresponds to the standard deviation. So anything above 2.5 or below negative 2.5 is considered an outlier. So you can define your outliers, and outliers are generally thought of as superfluous or bad or something else. You don't want to have too many of them in your data because it can throw the mean off. It can throw the mean in one direction or another. The mean and the standard deviation are considered the moments of the distribution. And there are other moments like skew and kurtosis. So kurtosis is the height of this bell curve. Skew is the direction in which the mean deviates from the center mass. So sometimes the mean will be skewed in one direction or another. And that relates to the outliers. The outliers can pull the mean back and forth. And so that's these are all diagnostic things that you can do to see if your bell curve conforms to the model or the ideal, the Platonic ideal, perhaps. So that's what a normal distribution is. Now, an exponential distribution is a little bit different. It looks something like this. Plot it out. And so here it's a little bit different. You have this as your variance here. This is your mean. But you're not really interested in the mean. What you're interested in is the median. So the median is calculated a little bit differently. It's usually like, it doesn't rely on sort of the center support of the normal distribution or the Gaussian distribution. This is, again, frequency, and then this is your variance out here. You notice that this is the median of the distribution, that you have a good amount of, you have some measurements here in this part of the distribution. But really where most of your data points lie is out in this, what they call long tail. So this is the long tail. It usually goes out quite a ways. I didn't really give it justice in that image. Let me redraw this a little bit. So it goes out like this, and your long tail might go out for quite a while. Okay? And in this area are actually most of your data points. Now, from a normal distribution perspective, these might all be considered to be outliers. But look what happens if you take this point as the mean. You don't really capture much of the variation in the data set. So the mean would actually not be, actually this wouldn't be the mean, but wherever the mean would be in the distribution would not be descriptive of it. You would have a lot of things way out here. And then, this part of the distribution it wouldn't be described properly. So in a exponential distribution, we're interested in this area here, which has things of high frequency, or things of like high value, I guess, and then the large number of data points would be down here. So the way to think about this is that, you could think about this as like a set of counts along this axis, rank order. So if I have a bunch of things that occur, like, first place, second place, third place, fourth place, fifth place, and so on, I can put those out on this distribution. I can start with 1 and go out to like 7,000, right? So if I'm counting people in terms of the number of times they've done something, this will be 1, and I'll have relatively few people doing a lot of things. So it would be like, say this value here is like 20. So this could be like 700. So you see that like so if I say, how many times have you logged on to this website? And, most people will have logged on less than 20 times. So I have a lot of people out here on this part of the distribution. Maybe relatively few people have logged on more than 20 times, and maybe 1 or 2 people have logged on more than 200 times, going up to 700. So those people would be in this part of the distribution. It would be relatively sparse with examples, but it would give you most of your instances. So, I might take my data and I might rank order it like this. You can also, do a log transform of these axes, and, it'll give you so this is actually, this axis in a case like that would be instances or something like that. All right. And then this would be rank order. So we'd have rank order versus instances. I'm looking how many times someone did something. I have a number of people who did something, and I'm rank ordering it from 1 to whatever. And then we end up with this distribution. We can describe it as having this long tail, having this little part up here, and then we can analyze it and we can log transform it, and it's more linear in that case. But we won't get into that. So that's the idea. So why am I mentioning all this? I'm going to show you some data, and I'm going to explain why. So this is what I mean by a long tail. So you observe these long tails in community data. If you take data from different places, a long tail if you go to Wikipedia and you look it up, it's a distribution where the central tendency or the region of support is distinct from the tail. That distribution, that central tendency, or the place where most of the instances are, is very small, but it's distinct from the tail. The tail has many instances occurring over a wide range of values and are not considered outliers. Such a distribution can characterize rank items, counts, or frequencies of occurrence. And again, I just paraphrased that from Wikipedia. It's still pretty academic and rough, but so my statement here in this talk was long tails, but only for certain modes of engagement. So what does that mean? Well, one source of data we have is from Wikipedia. Wikipedia has an open data set, and this is the source, the URL for this. And I can send it to you if you want. There's a lot of data in this data set. There's a lot of data on Wikipedians, as they call them, who they're open source contributors. And they count the number of edits. So the way they run Wikipedia is that they have the people become contributors and they start to edit things. But they don't just edit and then go away. They try to build they try to build a reputation for each editor. So an editor, you can come and edit an article and then you're just an editor. But those edits then are reviewed by people who have more clout in that community. And how you would get clout is that you edit more and more articles and you do things. And so in Wikipedia's case, you're building upon previous work. And so, you're basically these different user categories or things from their data set. And you can see that the count of edits in these different categories. This one here, I don't know what this is. ECA, there's RV, AP, RO, and then you have these down here. I think these down here are casual editors, people who might contribute a couple times to a certain topic. And then you have some here who are basically people who review the edits and make decisions about what gets accepted, because you get a lot of people who make edits they replace pictures of people with different other pictures that are less flattering. They'll put in disinformation. And so Wikipedia, they want to sort of filter a lot of that out. They want to make it truthful, and to do that you need to have people who are basically debating and reviewing. Sometimes these reviewers are totally, they sometimes have a point of view, so it's not entirely objective. But nevertheless, this is a system that seems to work for a lot of things. And this is the counts of their edits. So you have this long tail in this editorial process. You have a small number of categories where you have a lot of the editorial activity, and you have a lot of people doing, relatively few edits in the whole Wikipedia system in a lot of category types. So, and then you see this again with edit counts over contributors. So this is just, I don't remember how many contributors are in this graph, but you see this long tail behavior again, where you have, this is the log of edit counts. So this is the number of edits by the number of contributors. And so this is another way to state this data. So this is what you see, this sort of signature. This is something to keep in mind if you're modeling an open source community. We would assume that all contributions are equal, or all activities are equal, and they're not. This shows you that that's not the case, and there's a statistical distribution behind it. This slide actually shows you that there are top 5 roles that you have that involve most of the editorial activity. And as it turns out in the Wikipedia community, we can isolate this to different administrative roles, verification roles. So they're basically doing these things as admins or verifiers of facts. And so this has a specific role in the community. So we can take this statistical distribution and transform it into something that is understandable. Why does this graph exist? Now, when you're doing your projects, this is one of the reasons why we want this open source ethics approach, because in an open source ethics approach, I can show you a graph like this, and I can explain to you the statistical properties of this graph. But unless you know why it is, unless you know about these categories and you think about this critically, you won't know why it's like that. So, you run into a similar problem that you have with algorithmic bias. You make a decision based on a statistical signature, and you don't really have a lot of the semantic properties involved in this. So this gives us some of that semantic content. And so, if you're doing, I want to start a group on kind of going through the available data for open source communities. And I want to kind of get into this issue of, I can show you a graph versus I can model a process and understand the roles. And I want to build a graph that is contingent upon these roles. And I want to explore the data in that way so that we don't, kind of make these blind decisions that serve no one's interests. This is from the Rockwire community. So this is another way you can do this. You can assign what I call, or that actually comes from the credit taxonomy for academic papers. And this is something that they give people who have different authorship roles on academic papers. And they give them these badges that denote different roles. And so in the Rockwire community, there are these different roles with different colored badges, and every contributor gets a certain number of badges assigned for based on what they've done. And there's this similar distribution to the long tail. You have this long tail of different categories. Community building is, relatively rare. Meeting attendees are relatively high. I guess that would be the same in our community here. Because these activities, are more or less, there's a lot more engagement needed for community building than there is for meeting attendee or a publication or, documentation creation. So you have that long tail. But again, this graph doesn't tell you a lot in and of itself. So another approach we can do is to build a network. And so each of these nodes, these dots, represents a contributor. And then these lines represent a connection between contributors based on their badge. So if they both have a badge of a certain color, they're connected. If they have two badges of the same color, so they can have multiple badges. If they have like a red badge and a green badge, then they're connected twice, and so forth. And so this is a full community network here from the sample of 21 contributors with at least one contributor badge in common. So you can see it's a big dense web of connections. These networks are actually very useful, though, for understanding some of these interactive things. And you can decompose these networks into what they call cliques, which are, if you can see, there's some structure where there's some triangles in here, and you see like different properties like that. They have something called a clique analysis, which you can do on a network that allows you to find like small, densely interconnected subgraphs. And so those subgraphs are often useful for discovering relationships between people. So for example, if I had a bunch of contributors who were doing like different things in common, I could put it into a graph. I could do a clique analysis and find people who are doing something, if they were doing like multiple things together. I could find that and I could suggest that they work together, or I could suggest that sort of project type or that badge type work together. And I can actually route people in certain directions based on that. This is the community manager, who actually is me. And then this is the sort of the root of this network, and then connected to people with at least 3 contributor badges. So you can see that there's, from this network, I think this is where the community manager sits in it. It's connected to all these people with at least 3 contributor badges. So 3 contributor badges is somewhat rare in the community, but there is this sort of relationship here. And this is maybe what you might call a directed clique, because it's like they're all connected. There's no connections between these. I dropped the connections out, but you have this structure. And, we can get into network analysis at another time. It's a fascinating area, but just suffice it to say that this is a method that you can use. Another one is where this is the network without the community manager in it. So this is where the community manager doesn't matter. It's just organic activity, although there is probably an invisible hand of a community manager in it. But this is where they're just kind of interactions between contributors based on their common badges. So the idea would be that if you have meeting attendees, nominally they're all kind of interacting in some way, or they have something in common. People working on education are connected because they're all working in the same goal. And, unless your community is really big, you're going to be interacting probably. So the nodes are the unique community members, the connectivity is the number of badges in common. Then this is a network, again, a full network without the community manager. This is a network for people who have at least 2 contributor badges in common without the community manager. So you see, when you use that filtering criterion, when you drop out certain connections, the topology can change. The density is less, so you still have these triangles. And you have triangles here, it's even less dense. So you can filter a network, you can threshold nodes and connection values, you can drop out certain nodes, and you can get a lot of information on the networks. And networks also follow this sort of distribution, this sort of exponential distribution in terms of the distribution of connections to nodes. So you'll notice that in some networks, this network isn't a really great example, but you have like some nodes that are what you call hubs, which have a lot of connections relative to other nodes which are peripheral nodes, which have fewer connections. And the idea is that, and this is something that they've studied in social networks. People have done this, studying social media a lot. They've used social networks. But the idea is that those hubs usually serve to connect people into the network. It's an idea called preferential attachment, where people come into the network, they find the hubs, and they connect to those hubs first, and then they may connect to peripheral nodes later. And so you kind of see that, although the hubs are also sometimes useful for understanding the structure of the network. So your hubs might be your community leaders. Like when you came into this community, you connected to Jesse and myself, and then maybe you connected to someone else. But that's connecting to the hubs because Jesse and I are hubs in our community, and so this is how these communities grow. You get people coming in, they connect to the hubs, then they maybe connect to some of the peripheral nodes, and then over time maybe they end up forming their own clique, and they disconnect from the hub, or they don't disconnect from the hub. And this describes a lot of the structured networks, and it's described well using this statistical distribution. Finally, I did an analysis of the Open Worm Foundation a long time ago, or this is from 2016 to 2020. I say a long time ago, but this was on 228 contributors. This data was gotten from the GitHub repo. And so GitHub actually allows you to download, or actually, I'm sorry, this was from Slack. Now you can use GitHub to get data. You can collect data from like categorizing your community members. You can get data like Wikipedia has raw data that you can grab. And these are all this is all above board ethically. It's not like you're stealing it from anyone. It's public. So, and then GitHub has data on like contributors. They have contribution trees. I have some videos on that in another place. But this is from Slack. And one thing you can look at in Slack is the messages that people send in the community. This is something that the administrators can get. You can, I've anonymized it here, but you have basically, people sharing messages in Slack, and it records how many messages are sent over a period of time. So what you can do is you can take that data and you can rank order your contributors based on the number of messages they've sent. So number 1, which is here, has sent the most messages in Slack. Probably on the order of hundreds. This is log transformed, so it doesn't show that, but it will be on the order of hundreds. And then these contributors maybe have sent 1 message or maybe 0 messages, but they're in the system. So this is the rank ordering I told you about before. This is the graph. It has this long tail. This is the tail here. You can see most of the members are in the tail. And you have about 60 of them that are in this red circle. And this red circle represents, I guess, what we've defined as specialized roles in the community. So you see all these dots are gray going out on the tail. every one of them. Then when you get up to about 60, you start getting these different colored dots. Until finally at the top, in the first parts of the rank order, like from 1 to 8, you get these blue dots. Okay. So what this means is that you just using the Slack messages as a proxy, you're assuming that the Slack messages represent participation. You're sending Slack messages to organize projects or to communicate, to find out information. So that's a good proxy of involvement, although it's not ideal. We just use this as a way to kind of get our hands around this, thing that we're trying to do. So these blue dots are senior contributors. So these are ascribed roles that people get in the community for taking a leadership role. So this is sort of self-reinforcing, right? You have a lot of contributors, you have a small number of contributors sending a lot of messages. They're doing so because they're trying to organize a project. You have Google Summer of Code students who need to send messages to communicate with their mentor. They need to maybe send messages to showcase their work and so forth. Then you have board affiliates. So the OpenWorm Foundation has a board of directors, and those board of directors are sending messages to communicate with the other, the members of the community. You have major collaborators who could be from external labs, but want to communicate with people. And so all those people, and then you have others that are in here, the gray category. So these are people without categories, but they still contribute a lot in terms of Slack messages. So these could be people who never got a senior contributor designation or didn't ever do anything else that was a specific designation. Now, the assumption behind the specific designations is that it's motivating to people. So this is another thing about your cybernetic model in open source development, is that these specialized roles can motivate people. That the assumption is that if you give specialized roles, it'll motivate people to contribute more. You can see that's true partially, but also that you have these others, people without roles, and you still have the signature statistically. You still have people who contribute a fair amount, not all of them, but a subset of them, and then a lot of people who don't have roles that are just not contributing very much. And that doesn't necessarily mean that if they have the specialized role that they would contribute more. It just means that they just haven't contributed for whatever reason. So I wanted to go over that, and that was quite a bit of, I just wanted to go over that because I'd like people to really appreciate, using data to answer questions. B, I'd like to start a group on this. If people are interested. I have at least 2 people who want to do something like this. And one person from one of my other groups that wants to, they have a background in data analysis and they want to get involved in something like this. And 3, I think it would be useful for this open source ethics effort to understand the relationship between data and decision making and kind of the model of the community. Because again, graphs are, we talk about algorithmic bias, but there's a huge issue with sort of using graphs to manipulate people. And I'm sure you've seen examples of this where they'll use graphs that show some simplistic relationship and they'll say, well, this is quantitative, this is authoritative. And it's not, because there's some weird thing with the axes where they purposefully try to manipulate the graph to show certain things that are maybe there, maybe not there. But we don't have any way to interpret it. And so this is one of the things I want to, and this is just for general research value too. If you're making graphs, you don't want to just rely on the graph. You want to make some broader point or analysis of it. Okay, Jesse, you had something you wanted to say?
I had a question for you, actually.
Okay.
So I don't know if I know Angela, and she presented on data trust, stuff like that. I'm not the most familiar with some of her other work, and there's also like, I don't know, the people that you mentioned, are they that you want to work with? Are they through Angela's stuff?
No, no. I actually don't know. Maybe she has people she knows that would like to be involved, but that would be good.
Well, yeah, there's a group that I have known for a while and like tangentially work with and talk with, and that Andrew's a bit more involved in, and also Jenny's sort of involved with them too in different capacities, called Make Truth Matter Again.
Oh yeah.
And they do a lot of things that are associated along those lines, but I don't know if they're doing anything so technically focused as like there's a lot of like actual data analysis happening in that. So what I could do is try to find some way to either connect you all, or like if there's a presentation or a website that I could direct people towards that explains this, that may be something that I can do. It doesn't have to be now, but like if you do want to make a group about this, I may have some leads for people that are very interested in similar things. I just don't know. I would have to talk to you more to like. I couldn't like I could have them just look at this video here, but I think I'm not quite yet ready to like. I couldn't do a repeat yet. I have to acclimate myself more to what you're doing fully there before I could explain it well to someone else. But I could, if you're looking to make a group about it, and by group I assume you mean like something more like, what do you mean, like a spin-off, a project focused spin-off, or like Cognition Futures kind of a thing, or like a specific other group of pulling many different people into a specific. I guess, what did you have in mind for that?
Well, I guess like I wanted to have maybe an informal discussion group. They'd be sort of involved not just in the open source ethics, but also just kind of like, how do you analyze an open source community, and how do you work with the data? And I don't know. I don't really envision this as being a very formal thing, but I wanted, if people are interested in participating, we might do this. We might have like and I wouldn't want to have like, I wouldn't want to put a hard focus on it right now. Just kind of like, we might talk about it and then go through it, some examples, and then keep working on it. And, at some point it would become like a reference point for people. We could, maybe publish a paper on it. I don't know if that would be, I guess it might be a good idea, but just like the mechanics of how to work through from like getting data for these communities to analyzing it, how to characterize it and so forth. It's very methodological, but it would be I think it would try to be informal, but I would like to be in touch with people who might get something out of it. That's the idea.
Yeah, I'm obviously interested in this, although it hasn't been my main focus, but like, if there's a way to, if you can put something together in some capacity, I can definitely get some people who either are directly doing similar stuff or who are very interested in, because there's sort of Make Truth Matter, and Angela's involved with them. For those who don't know, Angela's part of our lab and a longtime collaborator in some senses, but she's not always at the meetings like many other people. So just because there's only 5 people here today doesn't mean that's it. But there's also a few other groups that like there's some folks from Princeton and Vision that are kind of into this sort of thing, and there's a little bit of overlap to like the MIT AI ethics stuff that I've been at, like the methodological approach and data, like the causal diagram stuff and the causal mechanism things. There's a little bit of I could definitely ask. There's at least 3 different groups of people I could solicit for either involvement or just ideas. So depending on, I'm just mentioning that because I think that could, and I'm definitely, like, as far as my own personal interest, yes, I think that'd be really interesting. I would really like to have a focus on some I think as a side note, I may be going back to the MIT X data science micromasters program. So and also I'm going to be doing some data analysis for my new job also. So like there's kind of a lot of threads in that direction for me as well. So
Yeah.
I don't know if it'll be a main thing for me, but I'd love to be involved, and I definitely will be happy to reach out to the other folks depending on if it's relevant or not for your aims there.
Yeah, I think that would be great. But yeah, well, why don't we move on? If people are interested, let me know in the Slack or contact me, and I can put something together.
Yeah.
We can advertise it a little bit more, or maybe we can have a little bit of bootstrapping of it, and then we'll see.
I don't know where that would fit in the Slack. Maybe that should be like its own channel or something. I also wonder if there should be its own channel for like the Google Summer of Code stuff as well.
Yeah.
Or like if we should repurpose some old channels, just because like I think having specific project focused discussion helps from the deluge of other articles and ideas that come up.
Right.
So I'm kind of trying to steer us in that direction, just so people can see, well, what's the update on this project, as opposed to like 40 articles and ideas mostly by me. So I'm trying to help myself out that way too.
I'm not sure what. Yeah, well, I'll take a look at it and see if I can find. I know we may have had a GSoC channel
I think
before.
we did in the past a long time ago, and then it became like Break Vehicle or something else.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah.
I don't know what to do next. Does anyone else have any other ideas or things they want to? I don't think anyone had any presentations they want to do this week. That wasn't like Bradly or myself, right? I don't think so. I know Sam kind of mentioned some stuff, but I don't know if she's ready yet. She's not here today. I know Brian's has an obligation this morning. Aaron also. Aaron was traveling. I haven't heard from her. I hope her phone's okay. But yeah, there's a lot of our crew from New York Celebration of Computing is like
wiped out,
not present, but in our thoughts, yeah. What would you like to discuss next?
Well, we can get on with the submissions, which I haven't been. I don't think we have a lot new there, but I wanted to go into it. Perhaps we have some things we want to add here. This is 22. It was 21. So we have a number of things. So we have some things that we've passed on here. It's probably good because it's just not. So this was submitted. This was the EI workshop. This didn't happen. I don't know. It's a collective learning across scales. So basically, if we have like we put opportunities on here, and then we pass on them or we submit. I didn't submit to the Cultural Evolution Society because I didn't feel like the thing was really developed in the direction that I wanted it to, so we didn't submit to that. And then we can submit to conferences, or we can submit to even journals we can target and put them on this list. I just like to have some sort of, we want to be able to target things, we want to be able to plan them out and bring them to people's attention. So we had Gecko, which was rejected. That was with Ankit, and the paper we didn't expect it to get accepted, but it didn't get accepted. So Ankit is working on a plan. So if you submit something and you get it rejected, don't be worried about it too much. I mean, just read the reviews, and sometimes the reviews are quite helpful and sometimes they're not. But, I think it's useful for people to submit things to conferences, even maybe knowing that you're not going to get in, because it gives you some experience with like getting, reviews back and thinking about like how would you shape your work. So in Ankit's case, we wrote a paper on his switching algorithm. We've been working on, we're working on getting that out, but, people didn't like it for a number of reasons. And I told Ankit, the plan forward here is to come up with a set of revisions. And so now he's doing that, and we're going to talk about it. And then we'll probably target something else. So it's good. It's always useful to target a venue, target a conference submission or a paper submission, just to get feedback sometimes. If you don't feel comfortable with that, you can just solicit feedback from, your friends, or there are platforms where they have, pre-publication peer review. But I don't know. I've had mixed success with that. So we can, if you're interested in doing this, the first thing is you have to write a paper. Then you have to find a venue of some type. So there are different venues. This CogSci actually has. We didn't submit anything to that, but there is an opportunity again to do like a discussion group. And I don't know. Last year we did a discussion group on cognition futures or cognitive trajectories, and they're accepting submissions for discussion groups. I don't remember what the deadline is for that. I think it's in May, but
Yeah, I think you had a nice idea of combining like mentoring plus some. Like I could see, like I basically see like a combination of like mentoring plus frontier map, basically.
yeah.
Yeah.
So for what would that be for?
For a discussion group at CogSci 2020,
All right.
the next CogSci event.
Yeah. We could do that. Yeah, I think that would be good. You have to write up a proposal. I could write up a draft and. Yeah, I mean, this is something, again, we did last year, and if people, and I don't think anyone in this group except for Jesse and I were involved in that. But if you want to find an example, we have an example from, it's called Trajectories and Cognition or something, and it's on the YouTube channel. And it's, it goes through sort of cognitive science and the trajectories that have been taken and the trajectories that have been less taken. So I did a nice presentation on innovation and what they call the adjacent possible. Avery did a nice presentation on neurobiology and cognition. Jesse and Anusha Sharma did a presentation on developmental approaches to cognition. So you can see that, we took this idea of cognitive futures, this idea of where cognitive science started, and then looked at like some of the different possible ways that cognitive science could develop. So I mean, it's like just different approaches and seeing how they're complementary, how they're not complementary, and then maybe discussing a little bit about trajectories that have been taken or not taken and why. So we did that. That was pretty successful. We had some nice collaboration around that, or some feedback anyways. I don't think we really got any long-term collaboration. It's pretty rare to find long-term collaboration out of that. But I think that would be a good thing.
We did make a really good connection, but I didn't follow up with her that much. Someone was really active in our discussion, and she was really into what we were saying. She was a researcher. I could probably find her stuff again. I should have kept more in touch with her. There was someone who was really interested. I forgot her name though. But I think there's a lot of interesting. I'll submit something again for sure. I imagine they probably won't let us repeat, but why not?
Well, I mean, a different topic, not necessarily the same topic. So yeah. Okay, so we had Amaris had a comment a couple minutes ago. Do you have a book reading suggestions in terms of getting a grasp on how to read, understand data analysis? Do you have any books, Jesse, that you like?
I mean, there's a few that are like popular ones that I wouldn't be able to really comment on. There's some, depending on your experience level, there's some good online courses also. Like there's some Coursera stuff and there's things in edX that maybe are good for like introduction. I'm not an expert in this field. I would actually defer to. I know Erin's done a lot of data analysis stuff, so we could ask her. I'm sure Bradly has ideas also.
Yeah. Yeah, there's like data science, and that's usually like, where they'll write a book and they'll tell you how to implement some analysis in R or, some platform like that. Then there's statistics books, which are somewhat unintelligible because they get really technical. So it's really hard to find a good resource. Like if you're just kind of getting an introduction, they're like introduction to statistics. But like if you go to if you're in a program like CogSci, let's say, you have a couple options for finding like good statistical training. You can take like psychology courses. The psychology departments usually have good statistics courses. You can take, there's some courses in other departments that you can take, like in education or in sometimes in ecology, and then there are the statistics courses, which are usually pretty much for statisticians. So the books reflect that. And there's, of course, data science, which is more applied. I would try to go in the direction of data science to kind of get some background, some appreciation for things. Maybe we can put together some resources for people. There's a lot of videos now that focus on different techniques, so that's good. And we may put together a list. So yeah, let's think about that a little bit more. I don't have any really nice books to share on that. Yeah. She's taken a couple stats course. She knows what I mean by that. Yeah, so it's definitely an underserved thing. Like, because I mean, like I know people. When you're in CogSci, you have that problem. You have to kind of get a grasp on some statistical methods, but it's hard to get the actual methods, especially like cutting edge methods. You really have to search for a place for that, and that's really kind of difficult. But yeah, so let's go back to the submissions document. So we have the CogSci event, and we were going to submit a paper to CogSci. We never did, so this is a different CogSci entry. Let me put down this idea about the mentoring plus. I think that might be good to follow up on the mentoring part. Maybe the frontier map is too close to what we did last time, but there's also, alright, so New York Celebration of Women in Computing is completed. A-Life 2022, I don't know what the status of that is yet. That's still out. I think I'm using this color for completed. Although We Robot, did you ever hear anything about We Robot? Oh, it's May 9th, so we don't know yet.
No, yeah. That's a few weeks out, so.
Yeah. So EI 2022, that's been done. So actually, let me do this. Let me say held on. What was last Saturday's date? 9th?
That's the correct date. That's the date there.
Yeah, okay, 8th and 9th, yeah.
Yeah.
Alright, so we got that done. Alright, and then there are a couple that we didn't go for. Collective Learning Across Skills, which is an ICLR workshop, Cultural Evolution Society. SIPS, it requires a lot more than what we have in terms of resources for that. Artificial General Intelligence, that's deadline's passed. So, we try to meet deadlines. Sometimes we do, sometimes we miss them, so we just don't go for it. There are a lot of things to consider when you're trying to go for a deadline, but it helps to have that milestone there. Are there any other things, and I know we can add them later. I haven't been adding too many things this year, but maybe that's good because we were just overwhelmed last year with this. Are there any things you want to add, anyone?
I feel like there's stuff I should be putting here, but I don't know. I don't have anything right now.
Okay.
But I think it'd be good to look for some things that are hitting in a few months. I'm looking forward, honestly, to having a period of time where we can settle down and flesh out some things we're doing, because we have there's a lot of things that are moving right now. I may try to make like just a project management sort of tree or Gantt chart of sorts, just to show, because I mean we have things moving. We have kind of a few different trains that are all moving forward right now, and for those who, I think I can see them, because I am the lab manager, but I think for other people it'd be cool to visualize it a bit better. So I'll think about how to best show that to other people, so they can see, okay, well, Cognition Futures is doing this, and the ethics group is doing this, and Google Summer Code is doing this, and this frontier map stuff, and all this other things happening. So yeah.
Yeah. Did you want to talk about your frontier map paper?
There's not a lot to say. I don't have anything to show right now. I think it's more of a next week thing to show. What I may do, we quickly go through some things from New York Celebration of Women Computing, last week's conference. Also, I don't think they're going to be able to make it today, but the really cool stuff. There's a few things in the To Discuss channel on Slack that I wanted to mention, and also Rashab found something on Twitter that was like MIT Media Labs digital artificial life, digital something or other. Let me see here. Somebody share my screen for a little bit.
Okay.
If that's all right.
Yeah.
Whoops, that's not what I wanted to do. I'm going to quickly touch upon Rashab's thing, because that was pretty cool. Let's find it here. Yeah, here we go. All right. So quickly, I don't think I can do this.
Okay, there we go. Yeah.
Is it?
Yeah, I can see it.
Oh, now it's letting me clear my whole screen.
Good.
I believe. Okay, cool. Well, Rashab was at MIT's Virtual Beings Media Lab event. I don't really know what it was, honestly, but it looked like a lot of cool things were happening there. What I found from that was interesting was, they had Replica there too. I actually was just looking at Replica again the other day. That's sort of an a futuristic AI chatbot that's pretty advanced and pretty, like, you can play around with it at no cost right now. Fluid interfaces, yeah, they're actually they're one of the group that I kind of mentioned earlier. Like, they're doing. I want to reach out to these folks because they're doing designing systems for cognitive support. Cool looking head strap. But they're doing stuff with psychology and neuroscience and so on and so forth. This is the MIT Media Lab. They do that project stuff I mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
But I'm very curious about this group of folks. So more to follow up with them. I won't go too much into that right now. But I saw them. Oops, go back. I saw, that was this is an interesting thread to go into, not today, but something to discuss later, is some deep learning stuff, and Gary Marcus debates and claims about, what deep learning and stuff like that. To be continued. We're just not going to go there right now. Yeah, this is something that fluid interfaces group that I want to look more into in terms of creating these generated characters to support other folks. So we'll see. That's something I'll look into in the future. And then also, I found another group at MIT called the Personal Robots Group, doing data activism and talking about liberatory computing, which I want to look more into and make it with their ethics stuff. So that was a really cool bridge. I mentioned to Rashab, they weren't able to make it today, but hopefully they can in the future talk about everything they were at. So we'll look forward to that when Rashab can join us. Also, I think I finally got this here. I just uploaded. I didn't think I was going to be able to use it off my computer, so I just put everything in here as fast as I could.
Yeah.
But that's me in the car. A really quick set of photos for this. There's the cover of the program is me. Let's I have a better picture for that later. Oh, I didn't put it in yet. Hold on a second. Let me quickly kind of do this. I'll just show you this here, because can you still see this?
Yeah.
This image? It's not going to be the most clearest thing, but this is a really cool. This is from the keynote speaker on the first night, and it was just she was really, really good. She's I forget her name's like Melanie, I think, from Blizzard Entertainment. I have her contact information if anyone's curious about her, but she gave a phenomenal talk about being a researcher, being a researcher and being, now she does more data stuff. But she went through like her life journey of, she originally did like genetics research and then realized she didn't want to do academia, and then found a really amazing group of people at Blizzard Entertainment who do video games. But she's still doing a lot of data analysis and a lot of really cool stuff for her, and just how she's gone through that. It was a really, 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 there's so much wisdom in the talk. I think it's a great talk. It's a great talk for people who want to have, like she'd be an excellent mentor, and she talked about the importance of mentoring on her program, and it was just really, really good, interesting stuff that she talked about. This is kind of a nice trajectory of development here, and how, like, you know, you're gonna have ups and downs as you experience stuff and how you grow from it and so on. I won't be able to do a talk justice right now, but yeah. Oh, Amaris just asked. I don't think she writes a lot of papers currently, because she's not in a research output position at her job. But I can definitely like connect you two if you want. All right, I'm gonna go for this here. A major theme for her presentation was lies that she believed about her career, and it was actually really good. That's deserved. That was pretty good too. One of them was you can only do meaningful work in X. She kind of got a little bit of flack about switching to video games. She got some concern because she was working on certain parts of genetics, and she really liked the community, but she left because she felt there were a lot of different pressures in research and funding, suffice to say, that you know, would help people, but she left for her own set of reasons. And I like how she kind of pointed out that there's a difference between doing noble work and doing work that's right for you, and the different pressures you experience as someone trying to do things and find your path in life. What's a distraction from your career versus what's sort of pointing you out to where you should be going is a really good topic. This was the idea that you can't fail, or failure is not an option, or you shouldn't give yourself the space to try new things. Basically, there's a lot of really interesting things she mentioned about this. She talked about the importance of making mistakes. She talked about how it's good, how you, as you make progress and get to a point, making mistakes is really important to progress, basically. Ways to mitigate failure, ways to deal with hardships and going from where you want to go. Good ideas about giving yourself time to grieve and reflecting, and kind of figuring out your compass from your choices, where you want to go next. I really like this one. I think this is maybe the thing I've referenced most since the event, was this one is like, this is a lie that she's told herself during her career. And it was very much like, oh, I need to develop thicker skin. I need to manage the situation better. I shouldn't have responses that tell me I should like this or not. And I think this is a really important point. She talked about boundaries and you know, a lot of times situations that are causing problems in careers or other situations in your life, maybe it's not that you just have to deal with it and put your head in the ground and whatever. It's maybe saying, hey, you seriously need to pay attention and change some things. So there's a lot of really good like personal advice as someone who's going on a journey and figuring out your path in life. This was great. Do you have the better version? This I could spend a lot of time. Maybe next time we'll go into it because I don't have that much time today. But this chart about who is a peer, who is a manager, who is a mentor, what can you ask from them? Understanding that a mentor is a great person to have, and you should try to find them outside of your reporting chain. They can be maybe not your direct supervisor, but people who are in the area, but you're not reporting them directly is a really cool thing to think about. Peers are kind of people on your team, and manager is someone you can and should expect to be able to clarify expectations. You should be able to go to your manager if you have a clarity about what you should be doing and how you should be doing it. Go to your manager for that. That's what they're there for, and don't be afraid to reach out. And I feel like this is just a really great thing for early career people to have presented with. I've never seen a chart like this before. And there's still a lot of confusion about that. Sometimes people change roles. Like one of my colleagues, someone changed the role as a peer and then became a mentor and then became their manager, and they didn't know how to relate to this person at all, and it got really weird. And their former mentor was acting in ways that maybe it was more like a manager to them, and they had to adjust that and adjust a lot of expectations about closeness and what they disclose, and that's tough stuff. That's difficult. But I think that's really important. That's a great thing to talk about, and I want to talk about that more in the mentor program in general. And then we're kind of nearing the end of this talk. I really like that chart. Really like that chart, apparently. Okay, I have a bunch of pictures of the same chart. Sorry about that. I have the rest of them here. Okay, well, there's a summary slide, but for those who want to reach out to this person, I can give you this, but it's melee@blizzard.com. I'm going to reach out to her myself about some mentoring stuff and go from there. I'm going to try to go through these really quickly. There's me at one of the male allies discussions. I have my shirt on. I have my speaker presenter panelist. I'm a really cool guy. It's great. There's me again. And then I think we get to our presentation. There weren't that many pictures, but I got some of Brian during his talk. That's pretty cool. He did a great job. There's a few of them here, I think. This is a nice picture. Oh, it's Gary Marcus' perspective on stuff. Cool. That's another one. And then finally, I'll just do a couple ones here. This is me and Brian again. Oh, I don't have the other ones here. I'm sorry. This is me and Brian. This is one of the first times we had a real life event where we had oral folks together. This is the same image twice. That's too bad. Anyway, here's not a great picture of us, but there's a better one that I was supposed to share that didn't get here. But we had a good time, and if anyone's interested, there will be next year. It's going to happen. I'm going to try to be still involved with organizing. I may be actually part of their mentor pairing program next year because they value. A lot of this is geared towards first time or people who have no background in research, presenting their work or anything like that. So that'll be fun. It was a really great event, and I'll put together more usable pictures. This is kind of a last minute thing here, but
Okay.
More pictures ahead on that front. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, the oral in person, we had some things going on in London last year, and now we had the upstate New York in person this year. So yeah.
That's pretty. We're two consecutive years of in-person meetings. That's pretty good. Pretty good.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for that, Jesse. It's great. And yeah, if you could share those pictures, like when you, whatever you want to share, would be
I
good.
think I think I'm gonna make a simple Medium post about the event for our group, and I also have a draft of male allies. I was involved in a panel for thinking about graduate school and one thing too, like, just to say this quickly for all the young folks thinking about the future, there's a huge gap in advice you receive from. It's actually quite generational. Like there's very different experiences people have had as they went through their career, and some people are very aware of how things are different, and some people are not. And some people will be very adamant about the advice they give you depending on what they went through 2, 3, or 4 decades ago, 40 years ago, 30 years ago, 20 years ago. Things are different now. And some people, like, that's just something that stood out. I've heard about it. I've experienced it. Many of my friends in their own lives, like just talking to their parents, oh, you should do this with your job and your career. And that's, a common theme, but I just want to say, like, I would really suggest young folks get people from different stages in their career. Try to find mentors who have been in the game for a long time and see if they're kind of, understand the older generation's mindset in your career path, if you can. And you, like, it'd be really interesting if you can find older generation who's, like, kind of, for lack of better terms, outdated in their beliefs, and then older generations who've tried to keep up with what's going on, because there's just a huge diversity. And then as you go to people who more recently graduated, or maybe in the last decade, and are aware of, like, the markets and the opportunities and how to do research, how to do funding in a contemporary sense, there's just a really big, and it's not that everything's outdated. It's just the advice and the force by which the advice is given and the judgments that are made about you if you don't follow that advice are very. It's just, I would just say the best you can do is understand there's a lot of viewpoints about that, and even in conferences where there is people intentionally looking at early career researchers, there's a diversity of opinion about what to do and when to do it and the importance of it and what it means and how much you can expect XYZ when you go down a certain path. So just, if that doesn't make sense and you want to talk more about that, feel free to ask me or ask Bradley about any of that. We have a mentoring channel, a mentoring discussion, professional development channel. But I feel like that's super, you're going to run into that at some point in your career, and being able to talk about that, I think, is a really important thing, depending on whose advice you're taking and how much they're trying to push you in a direction. So I'll leave it at that. I don't know if you have any comments about that, Bradley, but I wanted to mention that specifically.
Yeah, I think that's great. But we can talk more about it offline, I guess. So yeah, and it's, again, mentorship is important, but a diversity of viewpoints is also important in terms of, like, who are you listening to, not just one person. But if I tell you something, I mean, I have a certain point of view, and but I don't want to monopolize. If you have other people you trust, please, take their advice with a grain of salt. It's never always.
It feels strangely familiar, like, with how I talk about the cognitive science project and AI stuff too. Like, I'm not trying to always be political and partisan in these things, but, like, there are like blocks or groups of advice, people that think, yes, this is how we should operate as a computer science person, or as an early career person, should be doing this. And it's like, there's ecosystems where certain views are really strong, and there's ecosystems that are totally different in those views. And it's just important. I feel like people often get wrapped up in one and may not see the other and feel a lot of weird pressure about XYZ. So anyway, enough about that. I know we're over time. But yeah, suffice to say, I might write a little bit about that. I'll definitely be writing also about the male allies. I was a moderator of a discussion about being a male ally to women in STEM or other people in STEM. And if you're interested in that, I'm writing something up about that too, and we can talk about that more. But that's all. A lot of good things happened at the conference, so I'm glad we did it.
Yeah, I'm glad too. It was very good. So yeah, we have I'm going to do one more thing before we end the meeting, and I'm looking forward to seeing that Medium post. So one last thing I want to cover, and I think Amanda discussed this. I don't know, maybe it was Sadhna, but and I think Amanda will be interested in this as well. We got into this issue about induction and deduction and abduction in AI. So abduction isn't like kidnapping someone; it's abducing. It's like a type of reasoning, and so I think Sadhna actually did bring this up in her mind map, where she was reading the Childless Hacker paper, and they talk about induction or something like that, and she wasn't familiar with what that term meant. So there are a lot of different approaches in AI to sort of like reason. The AI needs to reason and needs to put information together. If you just train a model, you have data about the world, you have objects, and then you have to figure out how they relate to one another. More critically, how action relates to other actions. So if an object falls from a height, as a human, that's it's due to gravity. The object is falling due to gravity. An AI won't necessarily know that. And so then people have tried to introduce things like a naive model of gravity to an AI, but these are all things that are you have to take into account. So there's this. I found this blog post, so I wanted to find like something very simple to go over on this. Their academic papers are probably better at it, but I'll just go over this. This is Aaron Turner from Big Mother AI. This is a blog post. Artificial General Intelligence, Induction, Deduction, and Abduction. So I guess it's divided into truth, belief, cognition. There's some headings here. So it is sadly literally impossible for any intelligent entity, either human or machine, to observe the universe and determine with absolute certainty what is true and what isn't. In the final analysis, an intelligent entity can never be 100% certain that the physical universe it perceives actually exists. And so the idea being that, and Descartes brought up the point a long time ago that an entity can't even be certain of its own existence. So there might be some valid mechanism that logically implies you don't exist, despite your own perception to the contrary. So, this is something that we've been dealing with in philosophy for a long time. So how do you get to know the truth? And so this is where we come in with, this sort of method for sort of reasoning about the world. And so your induction, deduction, and abduction are just different versions of how to do this. And so this talks about cognition, this talks about the universe, percept history, which is where you observe things, you have observables, you're integrating them over time. If you're human, you've lived many years and you have experiences that you form when you're a child, but you also get additional information as you're an adult and as you're living your life. So, you have these sort of beliefs that form when you're young, you have these beliefs that you get from other people, and then you have things that you're observing and you have to integrate all of that. So induction in this case is, let me zoom in a little bit on this. This diagram I think will help. Induction is this relationship between your percept history, which is the history of different things that you've observed, and your belief system. So you're making an induction between the belief system and the percepts that you're experiencing. So you're integrating these percepts based on your belief system. You're kind of filling in the gaps, and you're inducing or performing induction. And so then there's deduction, which is, of course, we're also familiar with in terms of reasoning from a belief system. So you're deducing things. You say, if A is true and B is true, then that leads to C, that sort of thing. Whereas induction is, A exists and I believe B, therefore there's something else that I need to fill in the gap on. An abduction is actually a little bit different. That also draws from the belief system. So here we go. We'll talk about induction first. The inductive cognitive process is the only route by which beliefs pertaining to the physical universe may be added to the belief system, which it does by continually observing the universe via the entity's built-in senses or input devices. Each observation generates a percept, which they refer to as a time-stamped packet of information, which is like, this is something that they use. I think maybe the term percept is a little bit different in like cognitive psychology and robotics, maybe, or in AI. I don't really know, but this idea of a percept is like taking things that you see in the world and breaking it down into one a discrete thing. So a percept is like if I see a cup, that's like a moment where I see something and that's the object. I mean, I don't know if maybe that's an artificial way of referring to things that you're observing in the world, but this is the way that, we've typically discretized these things. So each observation generates a percept, which is added to the entity's percept history, the collection of all observations of the universe that the entity has made in its lifetime. So like a memory of this. Once the percept history contains sufficient observations, induction can start, which boils down to detecting patterns or regularities in the data. So every time a pattern is detected in the data, a belief, referred to here as a theorem, corresponding to a declarative statement of the form, pattern X exists at location Y with qualification Z. So they're using sort of almost like a Bayesian model here, where you have this pattern, you're using your belief system, you're using your percepts to say, this pattern X exists here. So this cup exists here. I know it's a cup because I've recognized this pattern from other cups. So I know what it is. And then there's a qualification Z, which means that the cup, it's contingent on me verifying that it is a cup and not like some bowl or something that has the shape of a cup but actually is not. So this is the way you would use induction. And then you can add this to the belief system, so you can actually, encode this as a belief. So, because the raw percept data is noisy, sometimes a pattern might only be determined to be present in the data with a certain probability. So I want to say it's a dog, but it also could be a fox. You're not entirely sure it's a dog. Or you can mischaracterize percepts, for example, hearing 4 candles instead of 4 handles. It might be a phantom pattern. So it might be like what they call a type 1 error in statistics or a false positive. You could identify something as something like a cup, but it could actually be something else. Or perceiving a dog when no dog is present. And so the patterns detected by induction are not necessarily limited to percepts originating from a single sensor input device. So this can be multisensory. Deduction then is drawn from the belief system more directly instead of the percepts as well. So if the universe were completely random, the only thing an intelligent entity would ever see when observing would be random noise. There'd be no structure, no regularity. So our universe does have structure. It's non-random, and if something is non-random, that means in principle it can be predicted. So not with perfect accuracy, but you can make predictions that are valuable. So this deductive process generates beliefs in this set B1 through Bn with their logical consequences, C1 through Cm. So you have beliefs, a set of beliefs, and a set of consequences. So, for example, if an intelligent entity has a partially matched to a dog, if it's partially matching what it's observing to a dog in its percept history, then belief B might have the form pattern dog D exists at location Y in the percept history with qualification, 50% match, only 2 legs visible, from which the entity will be able to infer new belief C. So this would be, just given this prior experience, you can say there is an estimated probability that dog D has 4 legs. So this is deducing from the information that you have, the object, the certainty, and other features. You can make this kind of statement. So you can say, there's a good probability that this dog I see has 4 legs. The 4 legs could be optical illusion. It might not be a dog, but we're pretty certain that it is. So this is an AI. This is called forward chaining. Similarly, the abductive logical cognitive process will often be facilitated in its operation if the deductive logical process is able to determine whether or not some conjectured belief C, such as dog D has 2 eyes, is in fact a logical consequence of your B set, which is your beliefs. This is known as backward chaining. So in other words, is it based on what you're observing in the world, or is it based on your belief of what a dog looks like? And so this is something that you have to, the AI or your own brain has to kind of determine. So it relies heavily on Bayes' theorem, this idea that you have these conditional probabilities. So you have a prior probability, you have a model of the world, and then you have the observation. So the prior probability is the model of the world. It's usually some Gaussian, like we mentioned before. Then you have a likelihood of something occurring given a certain condition, given that prior probability, that model. Then you have a marginal probability. And then you have this posterior, which is, does that observation fit my prior model? And then you generate a posterior probability, which upstates the prior probability. So this sort of reasoning is all based very neatly into Bayes' theorem. And Bayes' theorem, of course, is here. I have a lecture on it. If you're interested, I can send you the slides for it. Then there's abduction. So the abductive process is described as reverse deduction. In its simplest form, if an intelligent entity has made some observation leading to some belief C, then abduction asks the question, what hypothetical belief H would explain the observation that led to belief C? So in logical terms, we wish to find some belief H, such that H implies C. So we're looking for a belief that implies something. So this is different than deduction. This is different than induction. Absent further investigation, hypothesis H is merely an unverified possibility. But we have to generate this because we have to have sort of a way to, to reason. We have to have different ways to reason in the absence of evidence, because we don't always have the evidence we need. This is important for things like in scientific research, because you don't always observe the world. We always think of science as being about observation, but actually the further reasoning of something, if you want to create hypotheses, if you want to interpret the hypotheses, sometimes we have to create models that model things that we can't observe directly. Sometimes we have to create explanations that imply certain things. We don't want to be too far off base, so we use these type of reasoning strategies to get there. So if you want to hypothesize that there's a new planet, you might create a hypothesis based on the data. You might use induction, you might use abduction to get to that place. So abduction is more of a creative type of reasoning. So that's so this closes the sense effect loop, where you have sensation coming in, you have an effector that's acting on the world, and there's this process in the brain that relies on these types of reasoning to close this loop and to make it sort of provide feedback to the individual. And then there's this other paper that I won't get into, but this is about abduction and induction in artificial intelligence, and this is a review from the Journal of Applied Logic. So I will leave that there, and if you're interested, I can send you the papers for this, or put them in the Slack channel with the recording for today. So I didn't want to, I wanted to give you a little taste of that. I think there's a lot more to follow up on there. Definitely, and some of the stuff we were doing with developmental AI, it's very important to understand not only the nature of these different types of reasoning, but how they sort of emerge in development. And how they might have emerged in an agent from really nothing. Like I said, people use what they call naive models. So they'll put an innate model in place, and then they'll let that innate model that naive model of physics. Say it just tells the agent, what physical relationships are, and it allows the agent to take that and use that in those reasoning steps. So it'll start to apply deduction or abduction or induction to the naive model, and it'll be able to reason over time. It'll be able to bootstrap that from nothing. So that's all I wanted to say about that. I know there was it was kind of a whirlwind tour of that topic, but like I said, we can talk more about that offline or later in next week's meeting or whatever. Did we have any?
Yeah, I appreciate that. I would like to see the readings. I think a lot of the rest of this weekend for me is going to be trying to organize some both like materials and objectives and plans for things along a lot of things in cognition futures that are going on and everything else. So I think that's an important. I'm glad we're kind of taking a deeper dive into philosophy of these things again. So we haven't really done that in some time. So yeah. I'm excited about that.
Yeah. Any other comments before we go? Any questions?
Oh, if anyone else wants to say anything, go ahead. I have one other comment to say. We did miss him, but I just checked Slack and I did hear from Rashab, and he's very interested in talking to us. It kind of didn't really work out today.
Yeah.
But maybe next week or soon he may give us an update on what he's been into. He's doing a lot of cool stuff and thinking about a lot of ideas. So Rashab update to come, which is great.
That's great. Thank you for following up on that. Okay, so have a good week, and I will see you in Slack. If you have questions, let us know. Take care.
Take care, everybody.